and thank you for being here. As Jeff mentioned this morning, you could have been anywhere today, but you chose to come here to be part of this gathering. So I really appreciate you guys taking the time out and coming here. So with 27 minutes on the clock, let's get started. My name is Umayr Khan, based out of Texas, Pakistani born, and just sharing my experiences, learnings over the course of last 13, 14 years in terms of doing what I do. My topic today is Agile teams and OKRs. I think I'm going to come down. And learnings from using OKRs for an Agile team. This is as far as we're going to go when it is in terms of Agile, because everything I'm going to talk about can be applied anywhere else. Not just Agile teams, not just Scrum teams, not just software teams. It can be applied anywhere else. But this example I'm taking for the purpose of this conference, working with an Agile team over the course of last about 2 PIs, so 2 quarters. Question, how many of you have team-level OKRs to align with team-level KPIs? You don't have to answer that question, but I would want you to read this question and see if you can think of an answer to this question relating to your team that you're working with. As part of Scrum Master, as part of product owner, as part of architect, tester, QA, system engineer, release management, anyone, CEO, anyone, regardless of where you are on chain of command. Please think about this question as we go through this. All right. KPI and OKRs. So key performance indicator, one is a snapshot of where we are at this point in time. Temperature is 32 degrees. Okay, so 32 degrees is what indicates how hot or how cold it is. And then OKR is something that we have determined and defined objective and key result, because that is what's going to help us in terms of moving from 32 degrees to 37 degrees. Or not feeling hot or not feeling cold, how we condition to our body. So one being a picture in time, the other one being how we are moving forward to that designated temperature that we're going to get to. That's as much as I'm going to talk about that. So, as I mentioned, this is based on work that I've done with one of the initiative teams. KPI consideration-wise, this is very important. Every team has certain KPIs, and since we're talking about Agile team, let's go with the consideration that we have in this case. KPI in this case is velocity, okay? Let's just stay very, very simple. In this case, velocity, the amount of work, story points or stories that a team finishes within a sprint. First sprint completion, there's a reason I picked that, because the team that I've been working with, out of about 20-odd teams, this team is notorious for having carryover. Since I started working with them, with this train of trains, this team has not had a sprint without carryover. Since May, they have not had a sprint without carryover. So that is why first sprint completion, okay, that is our KPI, key performance indicator. Can this team have a sprint without carryover? And then stories carried over sprint. Every sprint they had carryover. Sometimes 5-pointers, 3-pointers, 8-pointers. Makes sense for an 8-pointer, makes sense for a 5-pointer, but 3-pointer does not make sense. Even 1-pointers does not make sense. So that is why this is the consideration for sprint completion and stories carried over. And number of defects. You would be surprised by the number of defects this team had when I started working with them, and I was blown by the number of defects they had. There are 2 things when we talk about KPIs and when we talk about metrics and numbers. Symptoms. And we classify those in quantitative symptoms, the numbers you see on any morning report or a weekly report or any dashboard. So let's start with quantitative symptoms, then we're going to go into qualitative symptoms. And this is this specific team that we have. Story carryover, sprint over sprint, PI2, 124 story points. Some of the teams do this work in their entire quarter. But this team was carrying over 124 story points in 3 months' time. Stories created after PI planning. That story point number, 334. That is a massive red flag. I see some of you holding your head and smiling. Yes, that happened to me too. Why after PI planning stories created is a concern? Because that also is a symptom where we're not spending a lot of time, quality time in terms of refining stories. We're just writing stories, putting them in the backlog. Oh, boom, story pointed, we're good. Come time refinement, sprint planning, well, turns out this one story turns into 8 different stories, 3-pointers, 5-pointers. So hence, we have 334 story points. Story completion rate. This is going to be awesome. It's going to blow your mind. 5-story pointer over the course of 1 PI was being completed in 1.9 sprints. 8-story pointer was being completed in 2.5 sprints. This team is a perpetual carryover team, quantitative symptoms. And then 78 release bugs. This was August release, yes. 78 release bugs, equaling 178 story points. So 334 total carryover, and then 178 quantitative symptoms. They are bleeding. And then some qualitative symptoms that we have. Code drop delay. Well, everyone's there. We're checking off code drop. And guess, out of about 12 teams, yes, other teams also contributed towards that, but their reasons were different. Not 334 story point carryover or 78 bugs. Code drop delayed for 2 weeks. Stories in open status 2 to 3 days after sprint start. No movement at all. So, what's happening? Well, we're analyzing. We're working on it. Okay, 1-pointer. We're working on it for 3 days, and we're completing it on day 5. It's a 1-pointer. Come on. So, qualitative. We're just not paying attention. Very important. 0 improvement items coming out of retrospectives. So, we're having retrospectives, but we're not getting anything out of it. It's like we're going to a party, a dance party, but we're not dancing. There's no music. We're just sitting, talking. And discretionary sprint closure subject to team's needs. So this one really threw me away. So Tuesday afternoon, what I was told when I started talking to the Scrum Master and product owner, okay, what's happening with you guys? Well, the Scrum Master was like, well, the product owner asked me not to close the sprint on Tuesday, so I just closed it on Wednesday. What? Are you? That happened for 3-4 sprints. When I started looking at the sprint reports, sprint closure dates, they were off. So product owners, feature leads, developers were driving sprint closures. Massive red flag. This is my favorite. Invest, test, failure. How many of you know INVEST? The acronym. User story, invest. Yes, no? Okay. So invest, test, failure. Most of the stories were failing the invest test. Independent, negotiable, value, estimable, small, testable. Even if you ignore everything in invest and you only pick S&T, that should help you in terms of invest test passing. Is the story small enough to be able to complete in 1 sprint? Yes or no? And do we know how we're going to test it? We're baking a 2-pound double-tier chocolate fudge cake. How are we going to test it? Well, do I see 2 tiers? Yes. When I taste it, is it chocolate? Yes. Is it chocolate fudge? Yes. That's how I'm going to test it, right? But when we ask the team, oh, we don't know how to test it. So quantitative and qualitative symptoms. But the good thing is, if you pay attention to that, these numbers are symptoms leading into what comes next. But before that, a word of caution. Anything that we do in terms of moving the needle in terms of our quantitative progress, leading into qualitative progress, utilizing a word that I'm about to use, starts with a B, ends with an R. If someone knows, let me know. Small changes happen over time. It's only when you start making the changes, when you start taking the step, that you are going to get to the top. You will not be able to do that. And then the next one, Simon Sinek. Does anyone know who this gentleman is? You start listening to that guy, and your world will completely transform. The stuff he says is basic common sense stuff. And this is one of those things. So many organizations, so many leaders, the fearlessness of organizational leadership manifests here. Leadership that is afraid to have short-term losses for the sake of long-term gains, they will never be able to be successful. You will have to be able to absorb those short-term losses. Only then you'll be able to have long-term gains. So, why I'm mentioning this? This was the conversation I had with development managers. We had program managers, product managers, train management, our testing management leadership, because the very premise of everything I'm about to share was here. That the changes that we're about to undertake are going to result in short-term losses. But what will that do? It will help us with long-term behavior. And that one word starts with a B, ends with an R, is the behavior change. We've spoken a lot about DEI behavior, human behavior. Govind mentioned a lot of it. Rucha mentioned, and there was another session we had. So behaviors. So talking to team, having different sessions, and that actually is going to be on the next slide. But before that, in light of all the symptoms that we had, the quantitative symptoms and the qualitative symptoms, we went back to the drawing board. And the teams have never done OKRs on an Agile team level. I had seen that before, so we're like, you know what? I spoke with the management, and I was able to negotiate a deal that, okay, let me work with one team, and if we see movement, fine, then I would want to expect you to listen to me. But if we don't see movement, then I'll just listen to you and do whatever you want to do. So work with the team, work with the product owner, work with the Scrum Master, the developers, feature lead, and we came up with OKR. Very simple objective. Reduce story carryover by 10% from PI1 to PI4. Okay, that was our one objective. Keep it very simple. And then, 3 key results. Increase first sprint velocity by 10% PI over PI. First sprint velocity, stories that we can finish within 1 sprint, regardless of the points. Second, reduce story point carryover by 15%, PI over PI. We didn't want to worry about doing it sprint over sprint. Let's give the team chance to breathe so that we worry about result over a quarter, 6 sprints, instead of just starting something new and then expecting a result, which is not going to happen. Human behavior, human psychology, you cannot get result overnight. It takes time. And then third, reduce defects by 10%, release by release. 4 releases in a month, so you have 4 months, about 3 months, to get into that behavior, into that mode of doing the work so that we can reduce it. So if you see a common theme here, it's just 10%, 15%, 10%. Why? And this is not a rhetorical question. Does anyone want to take a stab at it? Why we kept it so low? 10%, 15%, 10%. Small changes at a time. Baby steps. Someone mentioned how to eat an elephant. 1 piece at a time. Chocolate fudge vegan elephant. Okay, 1 piece at a time. You enjoy it with chai or whatever your favorite drink is. So these were the key results that we came up with the team. Now this is where rubber meets the road. The tools and behaviors that we came up with as a result of different working sessions. Now this is how. So many times, I've heard from different coaches, different teachers, the whys, the whats, the whens, the whos, but no one tells us how. So this is how we came up with these things. First up was working agreement. We sat down. It took about 3 sessions, 3 one-hour sessions, for the team to come together with the first MVP of a working agreement. DOD, DOR were the first 2 things that we wanted the team to finalize on, so that we can start working, and then we would evolve the working agreement. At least we have DOD and DOR finalized there. So that was the first step. And then we had some documentation. Retro actions. Remember, the team never had any action items from their retros. Previously, about 12 retros that I looked at, and they weren't documented. The reason was we believe in confidentiality, okay? So we don't want to document retrospective because we want to have opinions confidential so no one would get back. Okay, well, no problem. There's always a reason people do that. Maybe that was because of the culture of the organization, because leadership did not accept feedback, constructive or otherwise. But looking at what we did was retroaction, story analysis. We want to make sure that between sprint planning and start of the sprint, or maybe first day, we want to have some sort of analysis done for the story so that we understand what kind of work we're going to be doing. That can be in a document form, Word, just Jira document, or ADO, comment document, whatever you want, presentation, whatever you want. Leave it up to you. Be creative, or just be boring and just put comment section. Okay, but have some analysis. Unit test evidence, that was fun. The team did not believe in unit testing evidence. Oh yeah, I did unit testing. Okay, so can you show us? Well, I would have to do it again. Okay, so didn't you take a screenshot? No, we don't do it here. Okay, so we spoke about it as part of retroaction, and the team agreed that, you know what, it's a good idea that we want to have some form of evidence that will attach to it. Fantastic. Whether you want to create a subtask, whether you just want to attach it, completely up to you. We don't want to mandate that part. But since you guys have decided that we will come up with the unit test evidence, fine, just attach it. And then code review. Another funny thing, code review was being done, but no one knew who was doing the code review. The team had a feature lead, still have a feature lead, but there was no documentation of who's doing code review. It would be in the comments that so-and-so is doing code review. When you would talk to that person, well, I haven't looked at it yet. Okay, so that was another thing the team decided. That came from the testers, that we want to have tasks or subtasks for code review. Fantastic. I'm glad you guys agreed on that. So these three things came out of the retrospectives. Different retrospectives we conducted came out of these. And then the fourth one, not a fourth one, proactive product owner. Yeah, so many times, since this was a perpetual carryover team, 9 minutes, so many times it would happen, the items would be in acceptance pending on a Monday, but even when it's time to close the sprint, those items are still in acceptance pending, despite all the documentation, everything. So we asked the product owner, oh, well, I didn't get a chance to close them. I'll just do them tomorrow. And what was happening? Because of that, the Scrum Master would not close the sprint, because that would result in carryover. So that was one of the first things that we did, even before getting to this point. Told the Scrum Master, no, we're going to close the sprint 5 p.m. Central on Tuesday. Regardless of whatever anyone says, that is the first thing you have to start doing. And 2 sprints, everyone stopped saying, hey guys, can you please not close the sprint? But then again, this was something that we had to start working with the product owner on. And this again, going back to the fact that if you have 2, 3 stories every sprint for the last 6, 7 sprints, carried over, because I'm too lazy to click on a button and do the test attestation and close, I need to look for a different job then. Or maybe I need to move out of the product owner role and go somewhere else. So that was a conversation someone had with the product owner. Now this is something, remember Invest Test? So this, what we did was, we had a problem-solving workshop. So my first experience with problem-solving workshop was during my MBA way back in market research. I had no idea we would be doing so many years later, SAFe would be propagating this, and this would become an essential part of every team's philosophy. PI, yes, we've done that, but on a team, agile team level, this is something we really wanted to start. So this took about 3 sessions, just like we had the other conversation. Took us 3 sessions to move from 3 problems. Out of those 3 problems, we identified a problem. If you guys are familiar with the problem solving workshop, you start with the problem, you identify the biggest problem because of the root causes, then you restate the problem, you get into the solutions, brainstorm the solutions, and then you come up with a solution. So after 3 90-minute sessions, it took time. Invest test. What is invest test? Same, independent negotiable, looking at the stories. So making sure the stories are small, because another thing was, if your 5-pointer is not being completed in less than 1.9 sprints, there's a serious problem. Okay, what are you doing if you only have 1 story allocated to you for 10 days, if you cannot finish something that should be done within 5 days in 10 days, and you're actually finishing that in 2 weeks? So this is something that the team decided that we're going to pay attention on as part of our problem-solving workshop. That we're going to make sure we're not going to do any 8-pointers. I'm going to even try to do no more than a couple 5-pointers. We're going to try to have more and more 1 and 3-pointers. Why? Because if the work revolves around having a question, radio button question, on a pop-up on a landing page screen, we're not going to put all those 3 things in one story. And we haven't even gotten yet to the story points. This is before you get to the story point. Very important. You don't have to get to the story points to be able to break stories down. Invest test. If you see that there is a pop-up you need to develop, there is a question you need to put on the UI, and there's a radio button you need to put on the UI, those are 3 things you can easily have 3 stories for. So why make your life miserable by having 1 story there? 5 or an 8-pointer. You break it down, same elephant, the chocolate elephant, you break it down, you have maybe 1 pointer, 3 pointers, and you finish those. So invest test. At any sprint planning, any backlog refinement, any session you have on a very team level, you want to ask that question. Does this story pass the invest test? And if the answer is no, or if there's any hesitation from anyone, ask them why. And based on that discussion, you revisit the acceptance criteria. Okay? More than happy to go over those details, the hows of everything that is mentioned here. But these were the behaviors. The word, a very critical word that we do not acknowledge in IT. We're talking about JIRAs, we're talking about ADOs, we're talking about burn down charts, we're talking about metrics, but we don't talk about behaviors because we forget that it's people who are doing the work. Yes, we are developing software, but it is people who are doing the work. And people are guided by behaviors, which takes time. Human psychology, it takes time to get a behavior going. So very important. If you take away anything from this particular session is the emphasis and importance of behavior. Now, this is work in progress, but we still have some results. I wanted to showcase that we're still moving the needle a little bit. So reduce carryovers by 10% from PI1 to PI4. So PI2, PI3, PI4. 24 story points completed. PI3, 94. We had a 25% decrease. So we do have some movement there. PI4, so far, we have 79, so 16% decrease. So yes, there is some movement, okay? It does not matter how much. As long as there is some movement, we can say, you know what, team? Great job. Even if it is 1%, great job. Because we were doing 334 story points. Come on, who does that? Second, results. Increase first sprint velocity by 10%, PI over PI. So what happened? We had 12 story points. First sprint velocity, it went down actually, 92%. It tanked. Why? Because we had 78 defects. So that was the time where I started working. We started looking at it. So because of all those defects, the team wasn't getting time to work on functional stories. So everything was going on the back burner because defects take priority. So that was actually worked in our favor because we were able to see, okay, the impact of all these defects that we have. And then we came back 90% PI4, 9 story points. So we moved from 12 to 1.3 to 9. I'll take 9 any day over 1.3. KR2, reduce story point carryover by 15%, PI over PI. What we did was, from 23 went to 27, and then 16, okay? We had some increase, and then we had some decrease. So mixed, but what's heartening is PI4, it has actually gone down. So we are moving, we went up, then we moved down. Keyword, behaviors. You have to stick to the behaviors, no matter how boring it is, how tedious it is. And then reduce defects by 10%. So remember, 78, November, we had 39, less than half. Okay, and this is current, 59%, 16 defects up until a week and a half ago. Hopefully, it should not be many more than that. The learnings from here, OKR is not everything. Yes, we need to define the OKRs. We need to define objective and key results. You have to keep it very simple, very basic to the team. Why to the team? Because team is the customer in this case. If you're an RTE, if you're an Agile coach, if you're a program manager, if you're a Scrum Master, your customer is the team. Team is suffering, team is bleeding, all those carryovers. So team is our customer for whom we are going to identify with the help of the team different behaviors that we spoke about on the previous few screens. And the secret sauce here is the behaviors again. It's what we want to do, analyzing, breaking story down, okay. Looking at our test evidence, attaching the test evidence. It pains to do certain paperwork, especially developers and testers. They don't like it, but you have to be able to do it regardless. When someone comes to you and says, you know what, this is going to help. Yes, I have no idea, what Abigail has in mind, but she's going to have to build some rapport with me. She's going to have to establish her credibility. But the fact that she's saying something to me in a position, she has 15 years of experience and 10 years of experience, way more experience than I have as a developer, that's why she's saying that to me. So I need to listen. So you want to pay attention to that. Behaviors. Now, this is something I read recently. Working with teams, moving Agile needle is like moving people from crossing a traffic light to help them to understand how to cross a roundabout. Now, what's the distinct difference? Anyone can tell me. Traffic light versus roundabout. Okay, so you have to keep moving. So no traffic light is telling you to stop. In a roundabout, you have to sense whether the car is close to me where I can move or I need to slow down. So moving an Agile team from a traffic light to a roundabout philosophy is allowing them to take that freedom by equipping them with the tools and the confidence and the learning that, okay, this is what I've taught you, I'm here with you, let's do it together. So now you don't have to worry about what I'm going to tell you. Now what you're going to do is, now you're going to, based on this learning, you're going to do it without the guardrails that I provide. I'm going to be sitting in the back seat, I'm going to let you drive. It takes time, takes 2, 3, 4, 5 PIs, but eventually the team will move from traffic light over to roundabout. Just like in real life. You cannot expect a 4-year-old to learn how to ride a bike in one day. It takes time. So, a few learnings there. And in the end, I want you to think about another question. What is one change you can think of that can impact your KPI OKR behavior dynamics in your team? You don't have to answer that. Just take it with you, because I'm sure you must have some stuff that is going through your mind. So if you do have something, fantastic. If you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to take those if the time is up, since I'd be around here. Thank you very much once again, guys, for being here. Since you could have been anywhere else on this Saturday, really appreciate it. Thank you.